Hello there. My name is April Lynch, and I work for VCU Rehabilitation Research and Training Center. And today I will be talking about customizing employment and the strengths of a sports fan. So just taking a look at the starting point of when I'm first meeting my client, I am going to conduct an intake, which is really just a brainstorming session with the client and his support network. So the individuals usually at that meeting are the vocational counselor or employment specialist, the client, and whoever is in their support network, like maybe mom or dad, grandparents, siblings, whoever is really supportive in that individual's life. And we're there to really brainstorm what the client would like to do employment-wise and come up with some different objectives based on exactly what their strengths are and maybe even some barriers that we might have to work through. This particular client that we are taking a look at today had a dream and passion to work in a sports facility. He had always been told, do sports as a hobby, that's an interest of yours, and he had never really thought that he could actually pursue employment in that area. He had been working in a hospital setting for about 5 years, performing very well in his job, and then he got to a point where he started to realize that he was ready for a change. He really, at that point, started thinking more and more about that dream of his to work in an athletic setting. So at that time, he then met services through DARS eligibility and then came back to VCU ROTC to pursue employment services with me. We were taking a look during the intake at his different hobbies and interests, how much he was volunteering already in the community and how involved he already was, as well as his different hobbies that he was pursuing in the athletic area, dodgeball, bocce ball, basketball, anything you can name. He's even going to community events that are for sporting events in the area for VCU as well as other universities in the area. And he was very motivated by these different hobbies and interests and thought that this could be a really great fit for him as far as an employment setting. Another idea with working in this type of setting, that athletic department would really allow him to feel motivated by peers around him that also have similar interests. Although he's there to work, he still enjoys being around people that have similar interests to him and similar goals with being, in an athletic setting. Last, we really went through his different skill sets that he had learned while working in the hospital setting, as well as his different volunteer positions he had participated in throughout years after being out of high school and just in that transition age of trying to decide what his next step was as far as employment. So we really looked at his different skills that he had gained in that position at the hospital, which were particularly sanitation skills, understanding universal precautions, and really just taking care of controlling infection rates in a different healthcare facility. So we could really look at this as transferring into an athletic setting, that those skills would be transferable. Once we got into the job seeking and development stage, this is really where the client, myself as the counselor, and his support network had identified that working in an athletic setting was really his ultimate goal, and how exactly could we pursue this goal. So at this time, really talking with the client about how he would participate in the job search and what exactly his goals were as far as working with his employment specialist. So at this time, we talked about the opportunity to participate in working interviews. This is a great way for employers to allow individuals with disabilities to come in and really try out the job and just show them what they've got. Sometimes being in a pressured interview panel type scenario can bring a little bit of anxiety. It could cause someone to not be able to really show their true colors and exactly what values they bring to that work culture. So taking kind of an outside look, thinking outside of the box and really looking at creating that working interview opportunity and letting them try out some different job duties and really just getting an assessment of them being in that environment. At other times, an individual might still want to participate in a verbal interview, but working with the employer, having myself as the employment specialist and the employer working together and really collaborating on how those interview questions can elicit the best responses from that potential employee. And this particular employer that we'll take a closer look at here shortly really thought outside of the box as far as how we could make that interview process comfortable and coming up with different interview questions that would really get the right responses to describe why this client was of value to this position and how they could be an asset to this company. Another way that employers could really open their doors up and think outside of the box as far as creating interview opportunities for individuals with disabilities. Sometimes just getting an idea of what that potential business is about, what their needs are, what the facility looks like. So really getting to have a tour experience, maybe even an informational interview, sitting down with the employer or different employees on that site and really getting an idea of what the different jobs are, almost like a job shadow in a way. So really getting an idea of whether this could be a potential fit for them employment-wise. And then also in the job seeking and development process, as an employment specialist, the goal is to really serve the client, but then also serve the business. So getting to know the needs of that employer and really understanding exactly how that client will best fit into their needs and also highlight that person's strengths as well, which then speaks to the point of having a motivating environment and having different job duties and aspects to that position that allow that individual to feel motivated to go to work each day and to really take ownership and pride in their position. So during the process of seeking the right employer, this is the job of the employment specialist or vocational rehabilitation counselor, going through the process of identifying potential employers that could be a match for your client that's seeking work. Really identifying fostering environments, individuals that are willing to understand the supported employment process, working with an employment specialist or job coach to promote the independence of that client, providing an integrated work setting, an inclusive work setting that promotes that individual being connected with all different types of employees and really being a part of that business and taking ownership of that person being their employee. Also, looking at the job duties that are specific based on those needs that the employer has. So really just dependent on what different job duties they're looking to fill. A lot of the time you could take different positions that might be considered high turnover or maybe some job duties that are not as motivating to some of your employees but might work out well for our clients that are seeking employment. And what they can do is really take those job duties and customize them into a fitting position for someone that is very motivated by those duties. So again, exploring that company for their potential needs and how the client can fit into that. Again, going back to the motivational factors, there can be motivation in the different duties the clients have or the employee is experiencing. It can be motivating in the sense of types of people they are working around and overall just that culture of the workplace. And in the gym where this individual became employed and that I'm going to explore here shortly, really getting to know his coworkers and feeling comfortable with going to them and identifying them as natural supports during times when he feels like he might need some extra guidance or support and his job coach may not be on the site at that time. So looking for individuals that are very supportive of working with our clients as well that can promote their strengths and independence ultimately. And then a plus as well with working with employment specialists, employers can bring the employment specialist on site to do disability awareness training. And this really just promotes that fostering environment in your company and allows the other employees to really understand exactly the supported employment process, working with individuals with disabilities and really highlighting their strengths. And we can tailor these specific trainings specific to that person that is interviewing and then potentially placed in that job. What I like to do when I'm meeting with employers is if they have like a team huddle or a team meeting, staff meetings that they do on a weekly basis, working with that employer to really set the whole team up for success and then in the end promote the independence of that client by just having that time to really come together and collaborate with the business of what is working and where there could be room for improvement. So then moving on to the interview and placement process. In this particular situation, the client was seeking to work in a sports facility, and myself as the employment specialist, I went out and met with different businesses and talked to them about what duties were going on in their sports facilities. This was really my time to be seeking that right employer, like I said earlier, and using those job development tactics to identify a fitting environment for my client. Through networking and other connections on campus, I was able to gain a meeting with the facility manager at the VCU Cary Street Gym. And what we did was we met and we talked about my client and we talked about his different strengths and abilities and how that could really be a part of their work culture and how they could see that really helping improve some productivity and efficiency throughout the business. And what we did is we talked about how they would often work with student workers because on a university setting, you'll often see student workers fulfilling part-time jobs. And although we didn't want to take away from that, we wanted to fill in the areas where maybe they didn't have that consistent work year-round because with student workers, they can only be working potentially for the school year and then going home during the summers or during their breaks. So again, speaking to that really reliability and if there's any high turnover occurring in the business, how can we fulfill that need and give you a valuable employee? So in this particular situation, there are some areas in housekeeping that could really be more concentrated on, and they were working on expanding their team. They had some student workers as well as some individuals from our VCU ACIT program doing some interning and helping with sanitizing equipment and working as far as the recreation side with giving out basketballs and different duties like that. But we also saw that there was a need in the housekeeping and often that there was a high turnover. So having an employee that would be reliable and long-term was a win-win for both of us because my client is seeking long-term employment that's fulfilling and gives him that daily purpose, and they were seeking an employee that would fit their needs. So what we did is we took an hourly housekeeping position in the VCU Rec Sports Department, and we had my client apply for this position. And from that point, once we had him in the system, we were able then to start customizing that position to really fit their needs as well as the client's strengths. So also during this time, while we were waiting for the application to process and going through that onboarding or preparing for the onboarding with human resources, I was working with the employer, the two specific managers that would be overseeing my client, and we were talking about different interview experiences to bring my client into that process and what would be the most comfortable for him, but then also allow them to get the information they need to process through human resources. So we talked about how my client may have a little bit of a barrier as far as just having a typical verbal panel interview that may cause a little bit of anxiety as far as sitting in a room and having a lot of questions given to him at once. So the employer and I brainstormed and we came up with the idea to kind of combine a tour of the facility as well as an interview. So we came up with some different questions based off of what the human resources questions were and rephrased those a little bit to really fit the needs of the client, to really elicit those responses that would demonstrate how well his skills and his personality would fit into this work culture. So at this time, we decided to schedule the tour, and it was titled an interview though, and we were able to bring my client in, have a tour of the facility, and he was just motivated and so eager to be in this setting and walking around engaging with different employees in the setting and the managers, and casually asking him these interview questions while he's taking the tour really was a great opportunity for him to give responses based on what he was seeing in his environment and how he could see himself really fitting into this work. So as we took a tour of the facility and got to see all of the different athletic areas, you know, the racquetball room, the pickleball room, the fields, the outdoor adventure program, all of these settings were so motivating to my client because this is what he's doing in his hobbies and interests each day when he's not volunteering. So to see that these were the types of environments that he could be working in and actually employed in was extremely motivating for him. So they were getting enthusiasm and they were getting a lot of positivity throughout the interview and seeing that this could be an individual that would fit very well into their business. Once the tour was over, because my client had established rapport with the employer as well as the different managers that were interviewing us throughout the tour, we were able to then go into the conference room and really just talk about who he is as a person and what he could bring, what his strengths were and what he could bring to their business and that particular position. And we brainstormed a job description at that point. So it really was a rewarding experience, not only for the client, but then also for the employer, because they were able to see that thinking outside of the box and having different interview opportunities really gives a different chance to individuals that may not fit into that cookie cutter interview process. So really, you know, arranging that tour, rephrasing those interview questions gave the confidence to my client to perform in an interview experience. From that point, we were able to then confirm a start date, and the client was able to then consider himself an employee of the VCU Cary Street Gym as a VCU Rec Sports Associate. From this point, we were then moving into what we call the job site training aspect. So the client was then placed. We had started doing some onboarding with human resources at this point, which was some online modules. Of course, I was there to support my client through every step of the way because there may be some areas in those modules where some extra learning could come into place and specific visuals I could be using to really make these associations and connections between the training modules and what exactly that would connect with in his duties that he would be doing each day in his job. So instead of just kind of having an overview of these modules, really making these concrete examples in very black and white of how exactly this individual with autism could succeed in the workplace. So throughout the job site training process, we came up with the idea to chain the duties together. The employer was extremely supportive of giving us the checklist that each employee completes, and then we were able to go through it and highlight the areas that were very motivating to my client. This was promoting buy-in, autonomy, choice. You know, my client was very excited about being able to choose his duties and also be able to give back to the gym setting and be able to really perform some skills that he had a lot of experience in, as far as when he was working in another healthcare facility and being able to just promote that constant sanitation and cleanliness of the environment and allowing others to feel comfortable with coming there to work out and being motivated by that. So we continued to chain duties together throughout the job site training process. And then what we would do is implement supports based on areas where the client might need some reminders. In this particular case, the client was really seeking a smaller support that would give him those daily reminders if maybe he was having an off moment and couldn't remember the transition to the next task at that time. But he really didn't want to be carrying around a clipboard with all of his duties listed on that. He wanted to have something tucked away so when he needed that reminder, he could pull it out. But during the times where he felt confident and independent, he wasn't having to carry different supports around with him. He knew that he had it if it was necessary. So being able to implement those supports, again, is a way of thinking outside of the box to reach independence for that client. And then also teaching those supports to the employer and the coworkers on site. Because ultimately, this can then create the opportunity for natural supports and allow this individual to really be integrated into the workplace and be a part of his team and his coworkers. And although as an employment specialist, if a need comes up and additional training is needed, that is absolutely okay. And we would like to be that resource for the life of employment. However, this particular individual really wants to show his independence as much as possible. So making that environment as fostering as possible was key in this particular situation. So using that checklist or that visual textual support, as well as really identifying the appropriate natural supports throughout the facility to promote this connection with the client, to make him just, really understand and accept that he is an employee of the VCU Cary Street Gym. And as he continued to excel in his duties, we would add to his checklist. And to this date, as he is still employed there, we still continue to add in new duties as he masters different ones. So just remembering as an employer that if anything wants to be changed in the routines or additional training is needed, we are absolutely there to support you through that in a process that we call follow along or ongoing support. So this time is really once the client has met full independence in their job, they are feeling satisfied, the employer is feeling satisfied with their performance, and as the employment specialist, my observations are that the employee and client is independent in his duties and he is feeling comfortable in his environment. So at this time, I have faded my presence fully off-site. During the job site training portion, I was there every single day up until the employee was fully independent. At times, I was starting to fade my support back by going to different parts of the facility and letting him work independently for different increments of time. And if he continued to succeed in those areas, then I would continue to up my fading to maybe not as a proximity fade, which is where I'm on site, still doing some observation from afar, but then actually taking it further and fading off of the site. At this time, that's really promoting the independence and autonomy of the client and allowing them to see that they can work independently. And although they have their employment specialist or job coach still as a support and a resource, that they can be an independent employee just like the rest of their team. So at this time, when we're in follow along, we are really keeping that open line of communication with the employer. We are encouraging you to reach out to us if additional duties come up and you would like some additional training so they can expand their task list, or even if there may be some issues going on with certain duties and we kind of have to go back to the drawing board and either think about replacing that with another duty or what training or supports need to be implemented in that particular duty to then reach independence. So again, this is really another brainstorming session, and we can do this at least twice a month, but if the employer would like the employment specialist on site more frequently, that is absolutely an option. And again, just keeping that open communication and feeling comfortable with talking to the employment specialist about ways that you can really increase that independence in the client. And then also, if there's any additional modules that come up for this particular client that works at the gym, because we work for a university, at times there will be modules that have to be annually renewed. And during those times, if the client needs support with going through those different modules, I will go on site and we'll pick a time after his break or an appropriate time during the shift that day to really work on those modules and allow him to successfully complete the trainings just like the rest of his team. So he can really be following along as well with what exactly they're doing with their policies and procedures. And again, just promoting that ownership of him being an employee of that company. And just lastly, like I mentioned, really checking in at least twice a month. This could be in the form of an email, communicating with the managers on the phone, or through text message if that's the way they like to communicate, and also coming and checking in on the site and doing some observations and checking in with the client and making sure that satisfaction is across all levels with the employer as well as them. So that follow along is really the life of employment. We are here as a resource to continue customizing these positions to best fit that person, but as well the employer's needs. And so really just tying up the main goal of customizing employment. A lot of positions that exist out there may not be the right fit for a particular individual, and thinking outside of the box and being able to customize a position or restructuring a job to really fit that person and their strengths will promote long-term employment and retention due to them feeling comfortable in those duties and feeling so satisfied and having that purpose, because it does highlight their strengths and motivational factors. So this particular individual, as you can see, he is employed to this day. We are coming up on about 1.5 years of employment, and I was actually with him yesterday, and he said that this is his dream job, and his dream came true with finding this employment and being able to maintain it and being motivated by his peers and his environment. He gets to interact with former high school students that were peers of his. He was an equipment manager for his high school football team. And a lot of the football players that are now VCU students will come and work out in the gym. And the entire time I'm there doing observations, I am seeing that connection between him and his peers, and as well as his coworkers, and him really getting that praise and affirmation each day, which just reinforces that this is his purpose and why he's motivated to go to work each day and excel. And this satisfaction and purpose in this one particular client has led to many other, additional placements and partnerships that have continued through VCU Rec Sports, which I'll touch on here shortly. But one of the cool connections also that relates with this particular client is, he's a sports fan, as we had said in the beginning, and he is very motivated by athletic events and different outings. And a part of being a VCU employee, a huge area of reinforcement and motivating factor for him is that he gets a free gym membership and can access the gym if he would like to in his free time. And he also can be a part of different athletic outings that the Rec Sports Association is promoting, or the Outdoor Adventure Program. He's gone on some river outings with his peers, as well as got to participate in different events that are going on throughout the facility. And this, again, just really speaks to that motivation of the job and allowing him to fulfill his dream of being a part of this work culture and that athletic and sports facility. And the way this has continued on in our partnership is being able to duplicate this position that we customized at the VCU Cary Street Gym at another gym on campus who is under the same leadership. And they were just very satisfied with what was happening with this particular client and his job and how motivated he was and what he was doing. And they decided to take a similar job description and then duplicate it in another facility. And we were able to have another client hired on who had similar strengths and transferable skills from other job history. And then this has just continued to open doors throughout the VCU campus. More departments are willing to work with VCU Business Connections and VCU ROTC, and really just opening those different opportunities in their administration departments to lead to potential assessments for other clients. And if it ends up being the right fit for the right client, then it could lead to that as well. So really fostering that partnership and not just seeing it as one position, but how can we work together and collaborate to continue making great things happen across VCU campus and in the community. So just in final words, customizing a position for an individual can really promote their autonomy, their ownership of that position, and really just highlight their strengths to help them succeed in long-term employment.